The Pacific Ocean is by far the largest ocean on the planet. At 165 million square kilometers, it makes up just under half the total world ocean. Compared to the entire planet, the Pacific makes up almost exactly 1/3 of the total surface area. Perhaps the best way to show the ocean's size is to see it on a globe, or in this case Google Earth. It's basically the only thing you can see from certain angles. In all, the Pacific Ocean is bigger than Asia, America, Africa, Antarctica, Europe, and Australia combined. Or in other words, there's more Pacific Ocean on Earth than total land area. In many ways, this makes the Pacific Ocean the largest geographical feature on the planet. And as a result, humans have been interacting with and exploring throughout the ocean for thousands of years. Over this time, it has garnered many different names, but in almost every language today, there's just one. So, with so many competing names, how did we settle on the Pacific Ocean? Well, like most other names in Western culture, this story is about Europeans discovering things that had already been discovered, naming things that had already been named, and getting away with it. The story starts in 1513 with a Spanish explorer named Vasco Núñez del Balboa. But just a little background first, to many at the time, the Americas were still very new lands with unknown extents, and not everyone was convinced they weren't just a part of Asia at this point. Remember, this was only 21 years after America had been rediscovered by Europeans. But this was all beginning to change when Balboa landed in a place we'd call the Isthmus of Panama, the thin stretch of land connecting North and South America. Before long, Balboa crossed the entire isthmus and came upon another ocean, after having just left the Atlantic. Because he traveled south in order to find this new ocean, he gave it the name Mar del Sur, or in English, the Southern Sea. This was the first reported sighting of the Pacific Ocean's eastern side by Europeans, even though they had been operating throughout its western side for some time. Now, the purpose of all this exploration was to reach the East Indies for the all-important business of trading spices, namely nutmeg, mace, and cloves. And you can see on maps like this that a gap between the Americas was left, and this was presumably navigable water. Balboa discovered, however, that this was not the case. And around this time, the Portuguese had secured a trade route from Portugal to the East Indies by sailing east, around Africa and through the Indian Ocean. Also around this time, Spain and Portugal were fighting over territories in the New World. But instead of all-out war, they chose to take the issue to the Pope and have him decide how to split the Americas. What came from this was the Treaty of Tordesillas, which split the globe between the rival nations, so that Portugal had control over this half, while Spain had control over this half. What this did was grant the Portuguese exclusive rights to that eastern trade route to Asia, so if the Spanish wanted in on the lucrative business of spice trading, they were going to need to find a different way. This is why so many Spaniards were sailing west at the time. The King of Spain, King Charles I, chose a man by the name of Ferdinand Magellan for this task. Magellan was actually a Portuguese explorer who had previously served under the King of Portugal, King Manuel I. He was selected because he had spent a great deal of time sailing in the East Indies for the Portuguese, so he'd know his way around if he ever arrived there. So why was a Portuguese explorer sailing in the name of their rival Spain? Well, to make a long story short, Magellan had gotten a little too rowdy and fell out of favor with the Portuguese and decided to take his talents elsewhere. Anyway, Magellan knew that based on the discovery made by Balboa, the Americas basically formed a wall of land separating the Atlantic from any water on the other side, what people at the time were calling the Southern Sea. He also knew that to the north were perilous and frigid waters that many ships would not make it through, and that was no good, as the Spanish needed a reliable route to transport spices and other goods, so that they could actually make money doing so. Less was known about the southern flank of the New World, so they thought, what the hell, let's try it out. Magellan set sail for the tip of the South American continent on September 20th, 1519. This voyage was actually pretty crazy. The Portuguese sent ships to spy on them and they had to be eluded. Along the way, they ran into harsh weather conditions, and there was even a huge mutiny that Magellan himself had to fight against. But finally, they found themselves on the east coast of South America and continued to sail along it, looking for any passage allowing them to go further west. On October 20th, 1520, the expedition came across just such a passage. And better yet, the water was brine instead of fresh water, meaning it wasn't simply the mouth of a river. The expedition sailed through this strait with great difficulty. Here, the waters are narrow with unpredictable winds and currents. But once the expedition reached the end of the strait, which is now called the Strait of Magellan, they found exceedingly calm waters when compared to those in the strait. This was the first time Europeans had reached the Pacific Ocean by sailing westward. And because of just how peaceful the waters were, Magellan named them Mar Pacifico, or or the Pacific Sea, which, as you should know by now, later became the Pacific Ocean. Pacific, of course, meaning peaceful or calm. Magellan continued on to sail to the Spice Islands, successfully becoming the first person ever to circumnavigate the Earth, and died shortly after in the Philippines battling natives. This voyage sort of proved the existence of the Pacific Ocean to the Europeans, who again didn't know if America was part of Asia or not, and I believe that's why Magellan's name for it was adopted instead of Balboa's. Also, the Southern Ocean just isn't very descriptive, as we later realized. If you're curious, the word Pacific comes from the Latin Pacificus, meaning peacemaking, which itself comes from the Latin word pax, which just means peace. Where this word came from, no one knows. So it's kind of ironic when people talk about the war in the Pacific or the Pacific War, because, well, it literally means the peace war. That's all I have. I hope you enjoyed this one. If you did, you can always give this video a like and subscribe to this channel to see more videos like it. I have a whole playlist on how things got their names, so if that interests you, then you should definitely check it out. Other than that, follow me on Twitter for updates. I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.